I want to acknowledge that we're sitting in the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people who have lived here for a few millennia. So glad that they took good care of the land and the water and the animals that lived here so that we can enjoy them too. I'm Daryl Martin. I'm the past president of the Chamber of Commerce, and I am still the Chamber of Commerce representative on the Harbourwalk steering committee that gets convened by CRD. So I'm the official representative on that steering committee. We're here today for the Chamber of Commerce Harbourwalk committee to talk to you about our current intention relative to this Harbourwalk, and also to give you a background. So we'll start off with Robin Williams, who is over here.
Yeah.
He's going to talk about the history. He's not actually a member of the Chamber of Commerce, but he is an advisor to this committee, and he was a past president of the Transportation Commission, so that he has a lot of history, because there is a lot of history, let me tell you. Too much history, not enough action. There's reasons for that. So then we're going to hear from Bruce, who's over here. Bruce Cameron is a member of the Chamber of Commerce. He has a consulting company, Return on Insight, and he's going to speak about the concept going forward. And then Kaylee Yarwood over here is going to give us some visuals and more ideas about how we plan to go forward. So that's the basic plan. We're hoping to keep it to 20 minutes, and then we'll have lots of questions. That's the current plan. Sometimes those things get derailed. The committee that I talked about has a couple of other members that aren't here. Wayne Tepper is a member of the Chamber and on the committee, and our current president, Dale Murray, is a de facto member of the committee, and she can't be here. She's got a lot on her plate. So we have this committee that's trying to steer the Harbourwalk project on behalf of the Chamber and hopefully the community. I first got involved with the Harbourwalk about 10 years ago, roughly 10, when there was an election and the candidates were talking about Harbourwalk, and they really hoped to get it done by the end of the 4-year term, 3-year term. So that was my first introduction to the project 10 years ago. I joined the Chamber about 4 years ago, and I remember so fondly Matt Steffich was so delighted that they had finally won a struggle with Ministry of Transport to get a conditional agreement with the marina to allow a walk to go through. And that had taken a long time. So that was a big highlight. In 2020, I became president of the Chamber, and let's see, the memory starts to fade here a bit. So yeah, so November 2020, I became president. In 2021, I was invited to a meeting with CRD, and they introduced me to a very fine new employee they'd hired who was going to drive the project forward. And then we didn't hear from them again because of other things happening. And the thing, I'll leave it at that. The thing that I saw with this project is that CRD has a million things they can do, and they have a fairly limited capacity. They tend to do things in a very slow and careful way, and they really tend to react to things where they feel community support. So we're here today at the Chamber to tell you about our concept for the project, and about its history, and to look for ways to express the community's need for the project so that CRD will get it to bubble to the top of their heap. And with that, I'll turn it over to Robin, who will give you the history.
So, as Daryl Martin said, my name's Robin Williams. I'm the former chair of the Transportation Commission. I was on the commission from until about 2018. And I got involved with the Harbourwalk through my friendship with Matt Steffich. who was at the time, and I should clarify this, I'm going to talk about the recent history, about the Harbourwalk. I don't want to talk about the ancient history of the boardwalk. We've decided to change the name to get rid of the ruins that were kind of down there and really focus in on a much broader concept. And Matt was really the visionary and the driving force behind this, but he didn't really have a lot of experience with how you do things within our very quirky local government. And so he asked me as chair of transportation if I could give him some assistance. And at that time, and I'm talking about 2014 now, people might be surprised to be reminded that the Harbourwalk initiative was actually being driven by the Islands Trust. And the chair of, or the head of planning was actually chairing this huge group that included anybody and everybody who was interested to try to get something accomplished. And one of the things I realized right off the bat is that we needed to boil this thing down into a more focused group, and we really needed to get CRD involved because, for one thing, the Islands Trust can't own land, and the CRD, through parks, is about the only organization on the island that can really own land. So what we came up with is that we decided to put together the Ganges Harbourwalk Steering Committee. And this was kind of a bit of a social experiment that I cooked up because everybody's heard about the silo effects of our local government. Well, it was really designed to try to break through the silo effect. So it was comprised of a representative from the Islands Trust, the CRD director, the chair of the Parks Commission, the chair of the Transportation Commission, a representative of the Chamber of Commerce, and a representative from the community. And that organization, it took a while to put that together. It was properly structured through the CRD, and it was put in as a committee of the Parks Commission. Now, one of the things from where we're at today and where we were when we envisioned this was it was never designed to be a project of the Parks Commission. It was designed to be a project of the community at large. The job of the Parks Commission was actually delegated to work on Peck's Cove Park and the rejuvenation of Peck's Cove Park. Now, does everybody know about Peck's Cove Park and where it is? Anybody who doesn't know where it is? You don't know where it is? Peck's Cove Park is the section of land that's beside the brown house at the corner of Upper and Lower Ganges, across from Kingfisher, and it goes up to basically where the place where they sell used cars sometimes when they get away with it. That piece of land, which is really one of the most beautiful places in the harbor, is a park that is actually owned by Kingfisher, but it's under the jurisdiction of the Parks and Recreation Commission. And what we set was, we set a goal of having that renovation completed by 2017, July the 1st, 2017, which was Canada 150 Day. And in order to support that, the CRD director at the time, Wayne McIntyre, put forward $150,000 in Community Works Fund. And that was to be done, basically to be used for engineering analysis of the existing boardwalk structure and to help do the planning for the park and the Harbourwalk's actual development. Remember, that date was July the 1st, 2017. And unfortunately, we really missed that date. What transpired was the Islands Trust, even though they were part of the steering committee, they continued with this idea that they had for the project, which was that they could rezone the properties there. There are 4 particular privately owned properties that are in the boardwalk or the Harbourwalk section, that they could rezone them, and through rezoning, they could get compliance and assistance from the property owners. So in January of 2016, they had an infamous town hall meeting. I don't know if any of you were there, I know Gail was there, but I remember going into the meeting, and Peter Luckham, who's the chair of the Islands Trust, was going to chair the meeting. He said to me, "Do you think anybody's going to turn up?" And it turned out to be the closest thing I've seen on Salt Spring to a riot. There had been on social media some posts put out and pictures put out indicating that if this zoning change went through, somebody could build a hotel adjacent to the Harbourwalk. If you know the site, it's pretty infeasible because the properties there are pretty small. I mean, there was going to be some commercial development. But anyways, the thing just crashed. And the Islands Trust continued to sort of debate it I remember they had it on their agenda back in 2017. They said they were going to have staff look at it again about zoning changes. And really, there should be some zoning changes down there because if you know the fishery property, the one where the old log boom dock was, that property is actually zoned industrial, even though it's now got Barry Kazakoff's fish and chip shop on it. So there is some quirky zoning in there, but anyways, the Islands Trust just finally gave up and they said, we are not going to rezone it at this time. And so what happened after that is the steering committee met again and started its process of trying to get the project back on track with a new timetable. We were looking now to see if we could get the whole thing done by maybe about 2021. At that time, my term of being on the Transportation Commission expired, so I left the committee and Gail Baker took over as chair of transportation. And the really significant event was that in June of 2020, Matt Stepich passed away suddenly, as many of you remember, and that was a huge shock. And Matt had been the chair of the steering committee, and so at that time, the steering committee met again very shortly afterwards, which I'm not sure if you were chair, Gail, or Sonia was chair then, but at that time the steering committee formally approached the CRD Parks and Recreation Committee to take the project on as a Parks and Recreation project. And at their meeting, they set out some pretty ambitious goals. They wanted to see the boardwalk go all the way to Moby's, something we were just talking about privately. They asked Parks and Recreation to treat it as a priority project on their list of projects. And what happened after that was that one of the problems that I realized after we raised the financing, we raised $150,000 from the Community Works Fund, is that you cannot use that money for CRD staff salaries. It's restricted. And if you know how the CRD really runs here, they kind of run Salt Spring like a business unit. We were on a pay-for-use service basis. So it's like if you go to a lawyer or something, you know, you have to give them some money and then you get some hours out of them. So basically, we came into a problem with the CRD administration that there was no funding for actual staff to be dedicated to it. They would have to jerry-rig it out of their existing budgets. And essentially, that never happened. In fact, what eventually happened was that the project was just saddled or shelved. It was just put in the minutes that it was not, one of their meetings, they just made it, the administration made a decision saying there's no resources to do this, and so it is shelved. So the next step was that there was a idea by the administration, I guess are the ones who conceived it, that what we needed was a new project charter. And this is something I find a little bit quirky, even for the CRD and the Islands Trust. But they said they wanted a new project charter, and they called the Ganges Harbor Steering Committee together to basically support this new project charter. And there was never really any discussion about the old project charter, and what kind of troubles me is that there was never any performance review of the old project charter. They actually did the engineering studies, but then it just stopped, and there was actually about $85,000 of the original $150 just sitting in an account waiting for some other tasks that it could qualify for. So that's essentially where we sit today. There was a new project charter that came out, and the big difference in the new project charter is that the CRD is presently going out for an RFP or a proposal from private contractors to do design, and they have asked for a significant increase in the budget. I think that, Gail, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they've asked for, collectively from Park and from Transportation, about $240,000.
I'm not clear on that. Okay. I was not aware it was that much, but they are taking money from transportation because now, of course, the pathway is being included in the design. So transportation is contributing that piece. I think it's around $50,000, but I'm not absolutely sure.
The other reason that's precipitated this is that there are 4 what they call the upland properties that are on the Harbourwalk route, and this is what really caused the original problems for the original boardwalk to be suspended. The properties are the infamous Cudmore Gap, which we were just talking about. That's the first property, and basically if you go to the existing boardwalk that's across from Thrifty's, you'll see that there's actually a section of the boardwalk that goes out and just sort of stops. And that's the start of the Cudmore Gap. Next to the Cudmore Gap, there's a very thin sliver of property that's controlled by the Farmers Institute. The next property, which I call the fisheries property, has recently changed ownership. It was controlled by Arvid Chalmers and John Fraser, but it's recently come under new ownership. And then by far the largest, there's actually 3 properties that are controlled by the Salt Spring Marina, which is actually controlled by a marina group. Pardon me?
Ganges Marina.
Ganges Marina, sorry, thanks, Tom. Ganges Marina, and it's controlled by a company that's actually based in North Vancouver. So one of the things that the steering committee was trying to do, and it was really when Gary Holman got involved, and it was his initiative, which personally I supported, by the way, I seconded the motion when we looked at it, was to go to the province and see if we could get a right-of-way through there. And the timing was very critical because the Ganges Marina lease was up for renewal. So it was a pretty timely time to go to the province and say, this is what we'd like to do. Well, the response of the province said, in favor of this, but you got to come to us with a plan. You can't just say, give us a right-of-way. So we needed to move on getting the plan. And so part of the new project charter, of what I read into it, is that they're actually going to come back with a development plan that will suffice getting the right-of-way. The only other thing I want to comment about that is where it's a little bit controversial and something we can discuss among ourselves is there is some issue about how far the new Harbourwalk will actually go. The original intent of the chamber and the original intent of the steering committee was to have it go to Moby's and ultimately connect from where the old Islands Escapades or Beachside is today, all the way around the harbor and all the way to the Moby's property. And that section is a little more complicated because in applying for a development permit, the group that controls Hastings House and Moby's and that whole section of landing there are obliged to actually do the boardwalk work or Harbourwalk work themselves as part of their development permit. And I don't know where they are in that whole process because I know they have done an upgrade to their marina, but there's been no actual rebuilding of any of the facilities down there. So that's kind of brings it up to where we are today. And the goal is to get the RFP in place and completed by the end of the year. And I also understand that the issue will be turned over to the new LCC once we finish through the election process.
Rob, just 2 points about the new RFP. The new terms of reference have, compared to the old one, they have added in, the new one adds in a sidewalk up above beside the road, so it adds in an extra portion of sidewalk up above. And the original RFP, the second RFP said the terms of reference stop at Pex Cove, and the consultant is not supposed to do any consideration of going any further. As chamber rep, I asked that the RFP be changed to say the consultant should ensure that the design is compatible with extending it later on, and that got included?
It got included in the minutes, and I have not seen the RFP. Has anyone seen it?
You haven't seen it either. So we're hoping that what was voted is included, that the consultant will consider that, because we don't want a project that is designed so it can't be extended.
You want to go first? Yeah, a quick comment about the upper sidewalk, because that's where the Transportation Commission really comes into play. And there's always been a plan to have a sidewalk on both sides of Lower Ganges Road. We went on the upper side, up in front of the Anglican Church, coming down Rainbow Road and around, for a couple of reasons. One, we figured we can't do both sides of the road at the same time because it would totally screw up traffic in the summer. We knew it was quite a bit easier and quite a bit cheaper to go on that side, because on the harbor side there's a lot of different technical problems. There's land issues because the land doesn't follow the road allowance. Road allowance has big chunks missing of it. There's like triangle-shaped property lines that go right into the road. The second thing is there are some fairly significant structural issues there. There's, if you go down and see where the old boardwalk is, you can actually see there's like a big tooth cut out of the rock there. We know there's fairly significant geotechnical issues. And The third reason was, I always felt like we can't start building a pathway next to where people want to build a harbor walk. I mean, you've got to integrate these two things together. And I always felt that possibly one way to solve some of these problems is the thing will be integrated by a series of access points that possibly could get us around some of the property issues. For example, we already have a very nice pathway that goes on the roadside of the brown house on the corner and goes to Modi's. So that could be integrated in at Peck's Cove into the whole concept. Okay, I think that's a good place to.
And so I'm Bruce Cameron. My involvement in this, my active involvement in this, started really in June 2020 when Matt passed away, and I was talking with Wayne Tepper outside of the gallery, and we said, you know, we can't let the momentum on this thing fade. We can't let it stop. Unfortunately, you know, here we are now almost 3 years later, 2 years later, coming up on 3, and not a single thing has really ostensibly been done in that time frame. So we had this informal committee of several people, and we decided, and I also have a polling firm, strategy firm, Return on Insight, but also a firm here called Salt Spring Insights, which we have a panel of people on Salt Spring, and we did a survey in 2022 asking about the idea of a harbor walk. Would you support it as a priority going from beachside to Moby's? 92%. Almost, I mean, that's unheard of on Salt Spring, right? So that means it would be very difficult to find people opposed to the concept. The overall concept is really that, just that. It's not just about this one piece from Rotary Park to Peck's Cove. It is about the overall, and we can't, even when we initiate this first phase, I think it's important, and this committee of the Chamber is going to make sure we hold people's feet to the fire, that the big concept remains on the table and is part of the plan. Because if you don't have that, there'll be certain decisions made that will make it impossible to connect the whole thing. And that includes a significant pot of money that will be there to fix up the sorry state of the boardwalk in front of Centennial Park. And right around the pathways through the village can be sorted out. That's signage and lines on pavement and stuff. But there's a lot of issues, but I remember thinking about, you know, what would Matt do? You know, and I thought, well, Matt would wear a colorful shirt, first of all. So I found my most colorful shirt today to wear in Matt's honor. And one of the things that a friend of his said to me, when just recently I was speaking about this meeting and this whole push to get the Harbor Walk going again, she said, you know, Matt wouldn't be hung up on that we have to do this and have to do that piece and have to think of, he would say, listen, at least this is a first step. Let's get this first step done, because with the first step, you're starting the journey and you've actually got a destination in mind. So I think we have to keep that in mind. I mean, we've been pushing, and rightfully so, for the CRD to finally do something rather than just talk about it, including the director and the staff. Now, Dan is a busy guy with a lot of other priorities. I've reached out to try to speak to him several times, and will be soon, before the January 30th meeting that the Chamber is officially on. But look, in the interim, the goal of this committee, and the reason why we're here today, is we really want to keep this alive and keep the concept and the support of the community focused on what's going on, how is it being done, and does the community support what's being done. There's a lot of, you know, dead ends, a lot of things you can get sidetracked on, including, you know, Mowat's involvement, the Cudmore Gap, you know, there's all kinds of things, and that corner property between Peck's Cove and Moby's. Regardless, I think we need to keep that concept in mind. So Kaylee is very skilled at developing digital assets, And so she's gone ahead with the direction of this committee and developed GangesHarbourwalk.com. It's a start. There's going to be more content populated on that, and it's going to be driven by the community. And it will be anything and everything that's said about this Harbor Walk, whether it's feasible or not. It will be posted on here. There'll be plans put up here and an opportunity for people to participate and find out what's going on. And it's really about education and oversight. And I think it's long past time for some community oversight on this, given the inaction that we've seen. So those digital assets that Kaylee's developed, please go to GangesHarbourwalk.com. There's a good video there that Kaylee developed, and we'll look for more of that. We'll also develop those assets. Kaylee's got in mind doing some more social media on that. And the intent of it really, to not lose focus, is to make sure that we actually get some action. Take the first steps without precluding further steps. So we got to keep that big concept in mind. I remember talking with the CRD staff 18 months ago about this, maybe 2 years even. And they were like, no, listen, we don't want to get bogged down. We're just going to do this. We're going to put the RFP out for this. If we do it that way as a community, that's all we'll get. And we'll have the boardwalk to nowhere, right? It'll be like, 400 yards instead of the whole harbor front. And so we need to, as a community, push back and keep the feet to the fire on getting that big concept done. And it's not going to be done overnight. There's a lot of issues and a lot of money involved and a lot of geotechnical issues. Robin's highlighted some of them. But with the Chamber's push, I think we can help the community keep this on track.
And I'm going to say this is going to be trivial to many of you, but every year for a number of years there have been active transportation infrastructure grants due the end of October. Now, there's no real money set aside for actually building the Harbor Walk. So I've asked Carla, I said, okay, you can put it out in January. It needs to be done by September. And she said, oh, I don't think so. That's something the community needs to help. If we are ready to write a grant, they are right now at $500,000, but they're probably going to be more. It would be significant. So all I'm saying, and I'm also not speaking as transportation, because transportation will probably want to apply for the same grant, but I think as a community, we need to get that RFP and those designs completed by September. So.
Yeah, and I will just leave you with a thought. I mean, I'm sure a number of you have been to other communities. Even a place like Lund, at the end of the highway, has a beautiful, beautiful boardwalk connecting like 2 stores, and the public harbor, the public dock. There's all kinds of examples all over this province, and there's money. If we show that we can get our act together and we have a plan supported by the community, CRD, the director, and the staff will be forced to get it done and make sure it's a priority. And it will attract other funding, I'm sure. There's a lot of money on this island that will personally, I think, support some of this. And certainly there's a lot of provincial and federal funding available. Yeah.
Thank you, Bruce.
So Kaylee, did you want to talk just a little bit before we open it up to questions, or?
Sure. Right now the website, as Bruce said, is just you just kind of whip that up. But I've got YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and emails communication, so that we can have a place where all this information is in one spot. Because prior, it's all in meeting minutes on the CRD website. That's all in 10, 20 different pages. So having it in one spot so that everyone is on the same page, I think will help the momentum move forward. And then having video. The video that you see on the front page was something quick that integrated a digital project by Dennis McGuire.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to film on location where Dennis did the rendering on what we can kind of see, what it will look like, and then look forward to more of that, more video, in order to get a larger groups chatting about the project. So that'll be the hub to go.
And it's great to have Kaylee's talents on that, because I remember talking with Kaylee some time ago, and she said, well, here's the file. And Matt's file was seriously like a foot thick, papers and paper clips and little sticky notes and maps, and there was a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of history, and we're going to shed some light on it where it's relevant. So
I'd just like to say, for those of you that maybe not know, Kaylee runs the Steffich Gallery now, and
Christine Steffich is here.
She's here as well. She arrived a bit later.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that there, to get our initial efforts and to help pay for Dennis McGuire's really early sketch work that we, as an informal committee, did, there was a GoFundMe set up, GoFundMe account set up, and that's still there. And there will be more announcements that we'll make in terms of public, the way the public can support this. But right now it's through the GoFundMe page. So that things like the Dennis McGuire architectural rendering, to at least keep the concept in mind, those things can be done.